dressed up like a paladin, striking a dramatic pose. Kind of looks like a martial artist that's chased down some guy, possibly has stolen from my uncle's store. Thou shalt now return that packet of cookies thou hast taken from my grandfather. For some reason I'm speaking in Old English instead of Chinese. This makes perfect sense. Okay people, welcome back to the Deck Building Guides. Today, we're going to be making a PvP build. Yeah, I'm kidding. We're tanking. Okay, tanking is kind of more straightforward, kind of not. The first thing to consider, straight up, the way tanking works is it's a kind of triangle. You've got glancing abilities through blades, benefits to both, it works with glancing. You've got evade in chaos, and you've got block in hammers. You can only choose two of these, so it's a case of you can have, glance block or block evade. What we're going to do today is glance evade, which is what I tank with when I tank, because it's just my personal feeling that it's stronger, but that's probably a preference thing. It's all viable. There's some other things to consider as well, which is self-heal and damage reduction effects, which also contribute to your overall effectiveness to take punishment. The other main considerations as a tank is threat generation, both single target and AoE, and yep, that's about it really. Just get the threat, hold the threat, take the punishment, good to go. This is the other thing that you will be looking at in combination with these three parts of the ability wheel, and these are very tank-focused miscellaneous abilities, including, and this is a must, Agitator. Pretty much that will be the core of anything you do, but I'm not actually going to take anything else out of here, and I'll cover that a little bit later. So immediately, what we're going to want to do is establish the basis of the build. Because we're using Chaos and Blades, we're going to throw on Escalation straight away, because this has generates a high amount of hate, which you want, that's threat per second, but also it has the advantage of stacking this exposed effect, which will buff your DPSs. So you're not just holding the threat and taking the abuse on behalf of your party, you're also increasing their damage, so your value just goes up and up. From here, I'm also going to take Illusion as one of our mitigation cooldowns, because it's just nice to have. You can also switch that out for other things. It's probably the weaker of the mitigation, but I like to have a couple on rotation. This, once again, is personal preference. You can build this pretty much any way you want to go. Now, this ward effect is something that you can get from a multitude of sources. You can also get it from probability down here. And it doesn't stack. You only get one minor ward effect, so you've got to select that from where you want to go. It's a very good thing to have, definitely, because it's 7.5% damage reduction. You can't scoff at that. Personally, however, I actually choose to get it from Steel Palace. Call me crazy, I don't use Intensity. But there's a reason for that, and it's that this is a decent damage ability, which is also AoE. And it benefits if any affected targets are afflicted, which honestly in a standard group, somebody is going to be applying afflicted. You get the ward effect. That's good. This will help with AoE threat as well, which is something that a lot of tanks struggle with. Now, this tree and blades, this one right here, is great. I just played that down really badly. In short, we're going to pull Crimson Theatre off, we're going to pull Art of War off as well, and we're going to get Shadow Play on. you pretty much use most of this tree. We're not going to use Perseverance, we're not going to use Innovate, and fucking Paths. What garbage is that? Be gone with thee! But, yeah. So, Art of War is a kind of AoE taunt and control effect. It also doubles up as an interrupt because of the impair, so you can use that very intelligently. And very importantly, which I think I have to go down there, for each affected target, the next 2 attacks against you will glance. It affects up to 5 enemies, so you can get potentially 10 free glances out of that, which is huge. That's 10 hits that will do no damage to you, and you can also use it to proc off other abilities. For example, Innovate. Whenever you are glanced 10 times, you cause the attacker to become afflicted with a damage over time, blah blah blah. We're not going to use Innovate, however we are, for this build, going to go over here and riposte, or riposte, or riposte! Riposte! Whenever you are glanced, you hit the attacker, dealing 138 physical damage. So obviously, that's a chunk of damage, and if we're glancing a lot, that's going to be great. So I'm going to throw that on there. We're going to skip right back down here again for no apparent reason. We are looking for, and I've lost it completely, Turbulence. Whenever you activate a Frenzy ability, which Escalation is, and we'll be using that a lot because that's our builder, you get a single stack of the Evade rating effect. Excellent. Now there's a reason this is good, and we're going to talk about that consideration right now. I said that there's a triangle of essentially glance, evade, and block. Now, for blades, you want to stack a whole bunch of defense so that you can glance a lot and get the benefit of that. For hammers, you want to stack the block so you can get a lot of block and benefit from that. However, for chaos, due to certain tricks like this, you can actually get pretty much all the evade rating you need from procs, which means you can stack defense rating, and you can also stack block for additional mitigation so that you can kind of con your way into getting all 3 of them. Now, I think there are ways to get that same effect, so that, let's say you go blades hammers for whatever reason. You can get it so that you can get block from procs and can then stack evade instead. It's something to research, it's something you need to look at. The number 1 rule with all of these is just be as clever as possible, because this game rewards you being clever. However, of course, Blade Chaos, best thing to do. We determined that a minimum of 600 defense, 600 block is a good thing to go for, and then your evade just comes from procs and abilities and all that good stuff. We're not going to proc much off of evade in the build that I'm building, however there are numerous opportunities down here. Backlash, as a quick example, so that if you evade, you can proc an effect. And these are all very viable. Now, to round this out down here, we're going to go to this point in Blades and Martial Discipline, which essentially 50% glance. Hell yes! It's mitigation and it proc stuff. We're also going to use regeneration, because that then allows us to use this in periods of heavy damage to self-heal and help out the healer a little bit, while we are glancing and mitigating all the damage and all that goodness. Now, to round out our passives down here, I like to use Sixth Sense, because whenever you are glanced, blah blah blah, that's a nice chunk of damage, and also 10% of your health is not a small amount. If I just put that on quickly, 10% of my health in my tank set, and my tank set is not amazing. Once again, I've picked this stuff up from greed rolls, so I've still got some blues mixed in there. It is 1,150 health for me when that procs every 6 hits, which, given we intend to be glancing a lot, is going to be a lot on the self-heal, which is the kind of secret 4th kind of mitigation. and the fifth being damage reduction. We're getting that from minor ward. There is something else to consider, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now, just to round this out, and so we can kind of make it a little self-sufficient, shoot 'em up is something you can throw on at this point, which I'm going to just drag that on for the sake of it. This will set up, because escalation will proc that, so you get the afflicted state up, and then Steel Palace works. It also means that your DPSs have the afflicted state up, and thus do not need to apply it themselves, so it frees up a passive slot, or even an active slot if they're a bit weird, for them to use, which they can use for something such as Hammer 2-2, Insult to Injury. Because your DPS, generally speaking, will be critically hitting a lot more than you would, and this is a debuff effect on the target, which will stack with the minor ward, which ultimately reduces the damage they're dealing to you by 30%. And that's big. So if you can get your DPS to use that, because they'll generally critically hit more, you can keep that up constantly, and that keeps the tank alive. And that can be the way they thank you for throwing up the escalation debuff, and maybe shoot 'em up as well. Just saying. Other considerations for that, I'll cover them in a moment. Either way, we've now got quite a selection here. Probably want a Chaos point sync. There's a lot to choose from. None that generate threat. There's only 2 abilities in Chaos that actually generate threat. The other one is Reality Fracture, which is over here, and that's an AoE, which a lot of the tanks I work with use. I actually don't. What I opt for is Karma, strange as that sounds. It's a consumer, it gives you a self-heal, it's a decent amount of damage, it's AoE, it's also Frenzy if that's a concern to you, for example applying that shoot 'em up, which isn't relevant, or if you want it to be a bit random. I'm going to search quickly. Frenzy, set to passive, and I believe it's under Blade, and things such as Perseverance. That's irrelevant. Didn't search. Yeah. Perseverance. That's irrelevant. That will heal for an amount. There's also one under Assault Rifles. Leeching Frenzy, which, generally speaking, Leeching Frenzy you should only use if you're in a lot of DPS gear. Otherwise, Perseverance is actually probably going to heal you for more, I think. Don't quote me, I haven't crunched the numbers on those precisely, it was just a quick estimation of effect. So that's how my actives and passives look. There's a lot of things you can do differently, and by all means, I would love to have a discussion with people about alternatives, about their thoughts on it. Just, keep it mature. I don't like people calling each other idiots, because they might not be. They might just think something different to you, and that's to make them an idiot. If anything, it makes you an idiot for thinking that they are. Yes, turn it right back around. Okay, so, other considerations. Chaos 1-1, Intensity. The reason I'm not using that is because I'm going to get it through Steel Palace. However, that is a very good ability to use if you don't get the minor ward from anywhere else, because escalation is applying the weakened effect, so you're always hitting a weakened target. So you can keep that up pretty much constantly. Next consideration is Insult to Injury, which, as I already covered, is better on DPS. Definitely. There's no 2 ways around it, really. It just is. The next up is over here, which is You're Next. And that I would use instead of shoot 'em up, generally speaking. In fact, I'm going to put it on there. The only reason I didn't is because I don't have that much block. I'm going to put it on there, actually. It's a damn good ability, because increases all the damage dealt. So that's essentially, it sounds like as a tank you wouldn't want to increase your damage, but damage equates to threat. So damage is a consideration, even though you're reducing it to obviously stack health and mitigation stats, but it's still something. It's essentially 5% increased threat generation. You can think of it that way. But it also doubles all hate generated, so that is huge for holding aggro, and that will counterbalance the fact that I'm not using things like reality fracture, using this instead. Basically that will make the fact that all of this is AoE huge. It'll just own. Next up is Forged in Fire, which is something that I've had people suggest a tank equip that in nightmares I've been in, and we've had to argue it and essentially tell them perhaps you should learn to play rather than suggesting that. Forged in Fire seems nice in practice. Whenever you drop below 50% health, you regenerate 40% of your health over 10 seconds. Sounds great, right? If you take a huge damage spike, you can heal. Well, no. You see, there's only one fight in the game that we can think of which is scripted to drop the tank below 50% health, and for the record I am capable of healing somebody from 100 to 12,000 in the space of about 2 seconds when that happens, by using cooldowns and various abilities. Essentially what Forged in Fire does is try to offset the problem caused by having a seriously shit healer. So use Forged in Fire if your healing is an incompetent, drooling moron. Otherwise, choose something else, because it's garbage, really. That isn't even an opinion. There's no way you could justify that for legitimate application if your healer knows what they're doing. The next up, and this is actually active elite, is Stoicism, which Valus, who everybody's seen me playing with, he uses that. I do not. My active elite, I use Art of War instead, and the reason for that is that Art of War gives me a lot of utility, and also the damage reduction effect of Stoicism is very nice. However, the threat boost I feel is a crutch or a stopgap for bad threat generation. If you need that, either your DPSs are completely insane or you're doing a bad job. Just how I feel about it. That's a very subjective ability, and I'm very open to talking about that one a whole bunch. The other one is Fuel to the Fire, which was bugged initially so that it just didn't generate the extra threat properly. I believe it is actually working correctly now. I couldn't say that for absolute certainty, because I don't have a reliable way of measuring threat generation other than just calculating it. However, generally speaking, Agitator will be providing you all the threat you need in combination with threat generating abilities such as Escalation. So Fuel to the Fire is redundant. You should only really use that if you've got very, very high DPSs or your threat generation is just bad. I don't think it really has a place in a normal tanking build. The other thing is Provoke and Mass Provocation. Now, Mass Provocation, I actually get that effect via Art of War, and it's on a shorter cooldown. And I don't agree with it, to be honest. It is a targeted AoE, there's use for it, but if your group is positioned correctly and isn't brain dead, unfortunately nobody gets to see me do it, but Nightmare Darkness War, for example, the last boss, the very beginning, when the ad waves are coming at you. As the healer, I actually move around behind the tank and kite the ads so that they all run straight into the tank, so that he's able to use just standard player-focused AoE abilities, or player-based AoE. That's what PBAoE stands for, to get the threat, and also run it through their Crimson Theater and all that stuff. So I don't think the Mass Provocation is that great. Provoke, yes. I'd consider swapping out Illusion for that. Once again, that's really more to cover for weak threat generation, or if you have to maintain threat at range, which you do occasionally. That is a consideration. It is something to think about. My personal preference, because I don't really tank nightmares, once again, you'll have to adapt it for that. I just like the double cooldowns. Extra mitigation lets the healer just scratch their balls for a while in the middle of a fight. Even though I know for a fact that the healer doesn't really have anything to do anyway if they know what they're doing. Don't worry, Hypo. I'll talk to you in a moment. So that's about that, really, in terms of other abilities I choose. Essentially, when building a tanking build, you want to just sift through this tree, these trees, and these trees. Decide which of the two weapons you're going to use, and then concoct a build that mixes a good amount of threat generation with mitigation and procs off of the mitigation if you can. For example, Resilient Defender as well is something else. That is somewhat big. I definitely used that over something like Perseverance, which was up there. However, I don't feel it's enough of a self-heal to really justify syncing a passive. I think you get much more function out of things like You're Next, or even Riposte, you know? Riposte. Yeah, however the hell we pronounce that. I think there's more power in those than there is in a tiny... I mean, 43. That's like spitting in the ocean to try and flood Holland. It's absurd. It's not going to work. The only time I'd use that is in a soloing build, if you're using a tank basis, or in our elite two-manning builds, I do actually use that and Leeching Frenzy, just because it's relevant there, but generally speaking, don't concern yourself with it. And as for Mockingbird, yeah. So that's that, and I'll thank you for watching. I hope it's helpful. I just hit the desk really hard with the control of my headphones. I hope I didn't break that any more than it already has been. Yeah, hopefully there's something to talk about, something to think about. I'd love some discussion on this one, because nothing quite does it for me more than theory crafting in games like this, and it's part of why I love this game. 525 abilities, and you can only choose 14 of them. What better? And, okay, yeah, I just generally hope it's helpful. So thanks for watching. Hit some buttons. Hit buttons. And I'll see you next time. Take it easy.